Let me just start by saying that, yeah, I'm happy to be with you, but not only because I've known you for many years, but also because we, I imagine, are friends. And while I was trying to find a way to deal with this presentation, I was reminded that the philosopher that I study, and I also know that is quite dear to Dennise and also to some of us, Jacques Derrida, in his The Politics of Friendship, at one point more than once, he wonders at what would happen to the world if women, the ones who are totally excluded from the dominant model of friendship, the Greek, the Roman, the Jewish, the Christian, the Islamic one, suffering from the double exclusion of the woman as a friend of men or women as friends between and among themselves. What would happen if female friends would be at the center of the scene, beyond and other from the figure of the father, fraternity, virility, phallogocentrism. So not so much sisters, but friends. And with this kind of, I know that the experience of the summer school has always been a proof that, you know, being friends among women can somehow change at least the perspective on life. So I want to thank Dennise as a friend, a very discreet and very dear friend. I can also start being emotional, but I know that her invitation to PAF, to this incredible, utopian, fantastic venue for sharing, for conviviality, for her global condition workshop, whatever, somehow was the only thing that after longer than a year from my mother's death gave me some joy in life, just to give you an example. But anyway, let's start with what I apologize in advance. Dennise is impossible to summarize, but I try to do as much as I can, as best as I can. So Dennise is director of the Institute of Gender, Race, Sexuality and Social Justice at British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada, where I went some 2 or 3 years ago for an immense conference on activism. Dennise is not only writing and talking, but she's also very much doing the revolutionary part for whatever she can. And I was witnessing the love and the respect and passion of an incredible number of young students who really find that their centrality in Canada, in Vancouver, in the world, I should say, is something that we have to appreciate and celebrate as much as we, as a collective, we can do. Dennise, let me just give you some very short, nothing compared to what I could have done, but Dennise in 2007 produced this important, let's say just important, very important book toward the global idea of race. To me, it meant at the beginning when I read it, the first time in my life that I could see deconstruction. And the ones who know me know that my life has been devoted to Derrida, to deconstruction, to Hélène Cixous, to the whole venue of French deconstructive lineage. To me, she, not only Dennise, that was with Fred Mote and Stefano Arni, a group of people, but they have managed, in my view, to find a relevant language to to employ deconstruction in order to imagine, envision, and propose a totally different vision of the world, imagination of the world. So, I mean, to me, it was an experience of reading extraordinary in terms of me always fighting with the idea that, you know, literature is not relevant enough, that there is always a kind of escapism there, or that even my positions sometimes tend to be more, or at least seem to be more neutral. They are not neutral to me, but you know, when that kind of language and deconstructive framing of questions was applied in such an incredible way to race and to the global idea of race, to me, really, it kept me going happily for long. And I imagine I will have the same feeling now in 2021, September, if things stay the way they are announced, for the second book by Dennise and Pable, that with MIT Press, which in a way is already announced as being under the spell of one of the Black authors that I just adore completely. She helped me through the pandemic. She helps me anytime. And this Octavia Butler, the so-called science fiction writer, Black writer, that if you don't know her, please, even for the sheer enjoyment of her incredible writing, go to her and try to find whatever. Donna, which was the first book I read, The Kindred, which I imagine will be the one that really leads Dennise also in this writing. But, you know, whatever you find, the parables, fantastic work. She already knew that this kind of structure of the world would not hold, and was already anticipating and announcing what we as a task for the future should do in order to establish some kind of collective, empathic, friendly collectivities together for the future. She has, Dennise has, you know, I mean, I wouldn't even be able to summarize. She has co-edited with Paola Chakravarti the book Race Empire, The Crisis of the Subprime in 2013. Then she has published on all possible interdisciplinary journals, the ones I, you know, social text, fantastic essays, Philosophia, which is again very important, even you know, within the American standard, a very important journal, The Black Scholar. We will be talking about her involvement in cinema with the film Serpent Rain, which was the one I suggested at the beginning, but then I completely agreed with Renata for Water's Deep Implicancy, also because it's a bit, it comes after Serpent Rain, closer to us, will be the film that we will, after this presentation, watch and then discuss with Dennise. And of course, I mean, it is Dennise who is somehow the director, but at the same time, Arjuna Newman is also the one who is able to, how can I say, transfer Dennise ideas into a wonderful configuration of vision. So I'm sorry that Arjuna is not here, but you know, he's very dear to me and to most of us, the ones who know him. Then I was actually telling Valentina should be here, but Valentina is a free being. So she's so incredible in organizing PAF, which is this extraordinary venue, place, I don't know, even a dream, some kind of, I know that she's now in Lisbon, but I'm also sure that she will be engaged with so many other things that if she can, she will be here, otherwise she will be here anyway. And with Dennise, Valentina collaborates for these poetical readings, especially Sensing Saloon, which is this incredible experience of collective thinking with Reiki, with tarots. I mean, something which, again, cannot be summarized, but it is just an experience that one should be able to have and have again and have again for a whole life. Dennise has exhibited and especially lectured at the Center of Pompidou in Paris, Whitechapel in London, in São Paulo, in New York, for the Guggenheim and MoMA. And of course, I will also refer to an essay that was published in a catalog for the São Paulo Biennale in 2016, but she has been present in Liverpool at the Biennale in Venice, Documenta, and of course most of her more recent interest in art. It has always been there. I mean, the involvement and the recognition that somehow the artistic world is giving her is also through journals such as Canadian Art, Text, Kunst, and E-Flux, that is a very important journal, very open journal. Of course, hosts her writing as much as she can, they can. I mean, this is only very external. I don't know if the way I'm trying to organize, is to give a kind of general framing of some of the things that Dennise is dealing with, and then maybe enter a bit more into detail, quoting from 3 essays that have been very important to me, to my development, to my knowledge of Dennise. Dennise is a philosopher. She was a philosopher in Brazil. She has always been a philosopher. And of course, not only as a philosopher, but I mean, I should claim that her approach to theory is through philosophy. And it's not only through philosophy, it's also focusing on the discourse of philosophy in collaboration to the establishment of modernity and especially the modern man. Here you will see on the screen that what I reckon that was also the very beginning of her. Then Dennise will say that maybe I'm totally wrong. She will then give her own version of what I'm very apologetically summarize here. I mean, one of the things that the modern man, in terms of philosophy, in terms of what philosophy participated to create, was modern man as self-determination, which, as I put in parentheses, is somehow related very, in absolute terms, to transcendentality and the sovereign. So the modern man, given as self-determination, would imply the consideration of the modern man as transcendental and sovereign. This also meant, and this is also the question of deconstruction, the very basic dialectics between temporality and interiority versus spatiality and exteriority, the body, the territory. So the hierarchy between temporality and the interiority, spatiality and exteriority was that in the modern of the configuration of such modern man, body, territory, spatiality, exteriority, they were all deferred to the non-European, the non-transparent, the affectable colonial lands and laboring bodies. So it was somehow, in order to determine the modern man as self-determined, as transcendental and sovereign, that is placed in temporality and interiority, the dialectics with the other was also deferred to the so-called other, non-European, non-transparent, and especially affectable, as a body, as a territory, as the colonial land, as the laboring body. This was immediately the relation was established with an element of threat. The non-European, the non-transparent, the affectable was a constant threat to the self-determination, transcendality, sovereignty of the modern man. It was a kind of, especially considering the body as an element associated with exteriority, it was an element of death to which what science was able throughout modernity to claim was the reification of the non-European, the non-transparent, the affectable, exposing it to a violence that I will try to explain is total violence as a question of life and death, as a violence that immediately implemented this kind of configuration. And it was a violence that sciences, biology, history, philosophy again, Darwin, the whole apparatus of modern sciences actually supported, not, how can I say, in terms of protecting the modern man from this configuration of death as something which is bodily, deadly, affectable, and totally, in order to stay totally uncontaminated by what biology and sciences defined at the same time as pathological. So the non-European is not only the other from, is a kind of unsublatable stranger threatening civilization and evolution. As you may already imagine, or I mean, try to think, this is something that provoked the racialization of the non-European in terms of exclusion. But Dennise is very clear that exclusion doesn't mean a margination. It means a constitutive outside that lays the condition of possibility for the construction of transparent universality. So the non-European is outside, but at the same time it constitutes the transparent universality as the other respect to which transparent universality has to protect itself in order to advance in history, in development, in colonization, in whatever. So in a way, Dennise was also, I don't know, I'm not too sure that what Dennise is proposing is a counter-ontology. I mean, the way I really enjoy her writing is because it's totally beyond ontology. But, you know, in a way, if this was ontology, then Dennise was provoked to create a counter-ontology. And again, I'm not too sure that this, what I write soon after counter-ontology, spatiality, exteriority versus temporality is right. But in a way, it was in order to say that Dennise, especially in the global idea of race, was very much concerned about segregated urban zones, riots, revolts, fires, appeals from urban zones that are totally invisible but totally under control, or at least the power thinks that they can segregate and control these urban zones. Then the nation, so in a way, it was more in terms of geography, in terms of there is really a lot going on in the field of geography with McKean. I mean, in a way, especially in that book, I think that she was also imagining a kind of hierarchy upside down, which is also something that deconstruction allows in terms of, you know, not the relève, the Hegelian relève, but in terms of undermining the structure of hierarchy. And then, of course, the global. The global is very difficult to define, but I feel that maybe this kind of a process of differentiation along spatial variables, an uneven political surface, the condition of possibility for the scientific mapping of the racial. So imagine the global is not now, has always been a process that can be defined as globalized. And across this uneven political surface, or this process of differentiation, of course, distance, the other as a threat, needs to be placed at a distance in spatial terms. So the colonies and the other world, Africa, the Caribbean, whatever. But doesn't matter, distance is not necessarily what is so central, because also in proximity terms, also when big cities have their own zones of death, that's how Dennise calls them. The principle is always that the modern man, the capital man, must be uncontaminated by the pathology that somehow the same logic creates for the other, while creating the other, while at the same time, and that's the interest, creates itself. So it is in any case racial terrain that, you know, Dennise is also, has always been very acute in her consideration of the control, the surveillance, the invisibility of these zones of death. Therefore, I imagine for a whole writing that career, are always exposed to an exclusion by the rule of law. If you imagine, I mean, this year, last year, with the death, with what was happening in the States, you know, I mean, the rule of law never applies to the zone of death, which are already constructed as to be excluded by any kind of rule of law, because what the whole zone of death means is the way in which the threat of the other, invented in order to support and create the modern man, have to be under control, under surveillance, and invisible in terms of allowing the lack of rule of law within the borders that define the zones of death. This is a very general framing, and I apologize with Dennise. And actually, my interest is more in this, in what she calls writing experiments. And I mean, this is also something that I'm sure she will at one point deal with us, this rejection of the notion of critique, the formulation of a possible position beyond critique that upends the epistemic lineages of continental philosophy. So this idea that the formulation of a possible beyond critique is something which she's also very clear about. It's also a critical position towards materialism, which is still part of what she considers as important, but you know, even post-colonial, even postmodern, even, I mean, these are critics that very often are unable to deal with the problems that they deal with and also create, because in a way there is always this participation to the lineage of continental philosophies, the same ones that have been participating so heavily and so actively to what I was describing before. So in a way, I would like to deal quickly with three essays that to me, especially because if you have noticed when reading the presentation of the course, you see that there is an element, a beginning very critical, and at the same time also somehow we thought that we wanted also to look at something really resisting the tragedy of the ruins of capitalism. So these three essays, to me, they also mean, from the side of Dennise, the framing of the questions, and actually she's also playing with quest and question of blackness, and also giving, I will carry on trying to give you some hints at what she proposes in terms of ending the world the way we know it. So the first one is to be announced, radical praxis, or knowing the limits of justice at the limits of justice. A text that was in 2000, published in 2013 or 13. Here, Dennise does something which to me means, again, a lot in deconstructive terms, because she proposes to look at another horizon, the horizon of the thing, being provoked by the treasures and the gifts that the thing hides. Where does the thing come from? From Hegel, from an object, from what Hegel describes as an object of no value, the blackness of the American native, the slave, and which Dennise, and I'm sure that Lada would like this, instead is kind of taking from Beckett, from the breaking down of the subject. I don't know if Dennise knows that my undergraduate thesis at the time, long ago, was on Samuel Beckett, and it has never really left me in terms also of the experiment, the avant-garde, whatever. But the breaking down, I was working on Not Tied, this incredible film with the mouse that goes so fast for 17 minutes that nobody understands, but the text is there. So again, it was a moment when I read that she was referring to Beckett, was also very nice to me. So she recuperates the object of no value along a completely different lineage or line of thinking that is Beckett as a kind of incredible mind for something that was already at the time breaking with the world the way we know it. But Dennise takes around the thing. This is something which is difficult to express, and I do hope that Dennise will explain to us a bit better, because she has two main, Dennise is very, every time that you deal with her, you have to read Frantz Fanon, go back. I mean, I do believe that she works along that line. But here, she's referring very much to Walter Benjamin on the question of violence, and also to Bataille in terms of excess. So when I write that the thing somehow means the possibility of revolutionary violence, I'm referring to Benjamin, but also because Benjamin is saying that there are two kinds of violence, the ones that protects and the one that institutes something new. Both of them, Bataille and Benjamin, have in mind a male agent of violence. And Dennise is also very clear in taking her position towards that. But anyway, the thing is a referent of other desires, other figurations of existence. So, I mean, she never really says the thing is, but she always says the thing, I'm using the thing as a referent to. So in a way, the question of ontology is already active in the way she deals with language. The sexual as power hidden in the writing of the female other. The thing is not the thing, it's somehow before or after. Before writing, not in speech, and not necessarily not yet in speech. It's before writing and not in speech. So the question of deconstruction, again, before, it's always the feral. So in a way, the hidden, the sexual as power hidden, can refer to the black other, the female other, the sexual other. Anyway, it will be the referent of unregulated and unrepresentable desire, without patriarchy, without history, a figuring of the thing. So the thing never comes, but it's always there, producing references to something which could be considered, as Dennise says, the mediator, the third element, which she immediately links to virtual particle, free radical, signifying otherwise, troubling representation. So the question of representation was already there as one of the main area that Dennise deals with a very critical, radical position in terms of what it has meant to be represented and to claim representation also for women. So she's also dealing with Irigaray, even if she's somehow the marine lover. She's also exposed to some kind of critical position, but the cosmic, something which has no limits. So the cosmic excess, the abyss, the void. The void is important because it's, again, it's not along the line of representation, it's a space that can be populated by all the elements that Hegel was attaching to the despised and despicable thing, also one and many, which then become very relevant in Dennise's work, also the one and the many. So in a way, she says that what is really also provoking for us, us in brackets, is an untraced guide for a radical praxis that puts together knowing and doing without any assurance that we will win, that we will be successful, but still knowing and doing as radical praxis, racial critique, feminist intervention, a cutting through away from the confines of universal reason. So in a way, this is something which, in my own terms, I love: the unresolved, undecidable, undeterminable, unpredictable, unmeasurable power of the female. She says at one point, page 55, a referent of the thing without value, not in knowledge, morality, or exchange, she, the female body, exists as in excess. And I'm quoting directly Dennise because she has the language to say better than anybody else what she means. What I do is to track the unrepresentable sexual female body as a figuring of excess, which national and global moments exposes without resolution or apologies the violence of rational colonial subjugation. And she's proposing to create another text, perhaps to be more precise, a grammar that exceeds existing articulation of the human as a thing of self-determination, which is the stuff of violence. I will go to the other wonderful, very important paper toward Black feminist poetics, the question of blackness toward the end of the world, 2014. Here, Dennise is addressing directly Black feminist critique. That's her address. And I have only decided, because it's a very complex and very precise and very deep article, but I'm always with this idea to give a kind of manifesto of some of the things that she puts on the stage of collective reflection, is to review its categories, to rearrange its projects, to interrogate the very premises of its craft, again, without any assurance that this craft will not be deconstructed by the interrogation, to denounce the fallacy upon which the white subject rests its authority, to redress total value versus total violence. Total value is a very important, I have a feeling, claim that Dennise inserts in her writing more and more, which is not a question of compensation or recompensation of or whatever you have in mind. It's because the Black female, the Black so-called other, has been exposed to total expropriation, to total violence. There should be a way in which this kind of total violence and total expropriation should also be readdressed as a claim to total value. Of course, this is also a paper where Dennise is very generous in this kind of deconstruction of time as history, temporality, interiority. And again, I imagine her heart is with the process of unorganizing, unforming, unthinking, if thinking is the seat of the universal, the world, and in particular the world of categories. Let's remember that any time that she uses the capital letters is not in terms of sanctifying the expression, but is especially to put these words under scrutiny, because they are not neutral and they need to go through this sort of deconstruction. So wherever you find capital letters in her work is always mainly, then the plenum is capital letter, but you would imagine that to unorganize, unform, unthink the world and the world of categories towards the plenum, not as a universe, but as a canvas infinita, without reflection and recognition, with and without the horizon of becoming. The third, here she says very clearly, Black feminist poetics becomes here a world imagined as endless poetics, that is existence toward the beyond of space and time, where the thing resists, dissolving any attempt to reduce what exists, anyone and everything, to the register of the object, the other commodity. The third and last paper is on difference without separability, that was published in 2016 in the catalogue for the Biennale in São Paulo, Incerteza Viva. Here, Dennise, again, very short paper, but, you know, kind of explode. It really is an explosion of it is an explosion of ideas, but at the same time is also a wonderful experience of following a rereading of the whole horizon of philosophers, scientists in 5 pages. So, I mean, to me, and also what she says, somehow this paper, this intervention is focused on rethinking of sociality, which for the time being is considered to be an ordered whole composed of separate parts from without the modern text. So release thinking from the grip of certainty in favor of uncertainty and non-locality, and embrace the imagination's potentialities to create with unclear, confused, uncertain impressions. That is what Kant really despised, because it was after apprehension and before abstraction. She again regains the confusion, the uncertainty, the lack of clear categories. So knowing, in her view, should now become tainted by affection, intention, and attention, and also go hand in hand with reassembling, that in her words is to refigure the world as a complex whole without order, as a plenum coming from Leibniz, which somehow can be described as an infinite composition of contingent singularities entangled beyond space and time. So she goes to Galileo, Newton, Descartes, the contribution of mathematics, geometry, Descartes with solidity, extension, weight, Kant in particular, with the notion of separability and the categories of separability and determinacy. Hegel, that went even more farther than Kant with actualization and sequentiality. She's also going through the more recent developments in post-classic physics, relativity and quantum mechanics, with Cuvier mentioning Cuvier, Darwin, Boas with anthropology. What she, in terms of sociality, what she's really interested in is cultural difference, and also the position of Einstein with relativity. All these, especially these new developments in post-classic physics, for Dennise, even if they have told us many new things, they have never really collapsed the fundamental separation between human collectivities, that is nationality, ethnicity, and social identity in terms of gender, sexual, racial. So in a way, this writing is the actualization of the principle of separability. And Dennise, at the end of this very quick, intense, precise, absolutely illuminating reading of science and the history of science, somehow ends by asking, what if, instead of looking to particle physics for models of devising more scientific and critical analysis of the social, we turn to its most findings, such as non-locality as an epistemological principle and virtuality as an ontological descriptor, as poetical descriptor, that is, as indicators of the impossibility of comprehending existence with the thinking tools that cannot but reproduce separability and its aids, namely determinacy and sequentiality. She ends this short but important, which is being read all over the world and also producing enthusiasm and necessity to deal with what she's referring to. She's ending the paper asking for an ethical opening where difference is not necessarily within the logic of the cultural difference, but difference becomes the expression of an elementary entanglement. This is very positive, somehow very, it seems that, you know, she's framing the revolution somehow. Dennise in a very recent, in 2019 interview with text, a very beautiful interview where she starts saying that her heart is with ending this world and imagining a completely different one. She's also expressing fears or worries, not fears. She's not a fearful person, but worries. So even if, I mean, I've tried to give you all the, how can I say, what I imagine, the radical mapping of something, of tasks, but not necessarily labor tasks, but task of enjoyment, of collectivity, of thinking, of doing, of creating. Then, of course, I would also like to end this presentation with the quotation of what worries Dennise at the moment. I'm very worried that we may not be able to stop the end of this world in which we exist. I'm worried about the demolition of democratic structures that, through though limited and perverse, provided at least an anchor to claims for social and global justice, from indigenous, migrant, LGBTI, not white population everywhere, and could at times limit total violence. I'm worried that insects and other species are becoming extinct. The rivers are drying up. The oceans are being suffocated by plastic. The fracking is destroying and threatening to contaminate large areas of underground water. This is a long list. However, I'm invested because I don't see how we will be able to exist otherwise in the end of the world as we know it. This new world will have to be rebuilt and recuperated from the destruction caused by the extractive tools and mechanisms of global capital. Let me say that the Sensing Saloon, in collaboration with Valentina Desideri, is somehow a way in which this end of the world, the way we know it, is practiced, is not only communicated to the many people who attend and enjoy the week, but is also practice. I mean, it is really a venue of practice. And also, of course, I imagine that her interest in films, in this kind of visual communication, creation, is also what is becoming somehow, especially with, I've seen Dennise recently working with many young artists throughout seminars, long interactions with questions and, you know, workshops somehow. Dennise also in Serpent Rain and Four Waters Deep Implicancy is not only giving her, you know, I don't know, that's my feeling, that when I watch this film, is always this idea that really knowing cannot be, it's only through categories. Also what we heard at the beginning of the sharing of our seminar with the other seminar, theory and art seem to be totally in dialectics. Dennise, not only in her intention, but also in her practice, breaks with this dialectics completely. And I have a feeling that Four Waters Deep Implicancy will make it very evident. And so maybe also give one line of possible question to Dennise. And that's it, I've finished.